Good morning. Good morning. My name is Nancy McDowell. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at your church. Welcome, welcome. Summer has come in with a vengeance, shaking our worlds both near and far. So come into the community here, be held, welcomed, comforted, and inspired. No matter what challenges you're facing, being in community helps. Those of you joining online, you are community too. Welcome. And those of you new or returning, I see some returning members. It's wonderful to see you. You are welcome. New visitors, please join us across the hall for coffee and goodies and conversation. We look forward to it. So let me introduce our worship team today. Yvette McDonald will lead our service today. Yvette is our congregational life coordinator, as well as our ministerial intern. Thank you. Yeah. Our music features longtime member Jansen Wendell and the Bayou Porch Rocker. And Dawn Star Sarahs-Borchelt is our Director of Learning and Family Ministries, who does everything for us. And our worship associate who holds it all together today is Deborah McKnight. Thank you. A weekly reminder, check on the back of your orders of service to see what's upcoming, as well as on the mluc.org website. There's lots of things going on, even though it's sort of slower in the summer, there's still a lot going on. I think that's it. Now kindly silence your electronic devices and join me in reciting our mission statement. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith.
As we light our chalice this morning, let us reflect on the words of Nikita Gill. In a world besieged by heartache and agony, we all have the choice to be storms or lighthouses to each other. May we choose to be beacons rather than despair. Please now stand in body or spirit to sing hymn number 155, Circle Round for Freedom.
Do you know who this is? Okay, next slide. Do you know who that is? That's Anna Murray Douglas, who was Frederick Douglass's wife. And I know I've seen Frederick Douglass's picture lots of times in my life. And I have not seen Anna's picture nearly as often. I have some thoughts that have to do with patriarchy and colorism and sexism and all kinds of things about why that might be. But today I just want to tell you about Anna because she's really cool and we should know who she is. Anna Murray was born free because her 7 older brothers and sisters were not. Her parents were enslaved. But 1 month before Anna was born, they got free, they and all their children. And after that, they went on to have 4 more children. That's a lot of children. And so when Anna was a young woman and grew up, she decided to leave home and seek her fortune in Baltimore. And she lived there and worked for her living. And that's where she met Frederick, who was not free. He was enslaved, but he very much wanted to be free. And when he and Anna met and fell in love, Anna decided to help him get free. Because Anna had money. Anna had been saving up her wages, and Anna also sold a feather bed that she had made. And that was enough money that a friend of theirs, who was free, could go to the train station and buy a train ticket for Frederick to use. Because that way Frederick would only have to pretend to be somebody he wasn't, who was already free, to the conductor instead of to the ticket seller too. And so Frederick also borrowed from another friend who was a sailor that person's free papers. So Anna also helped Frederick get sailor's clothes so that he would match. He didn't really look like he was supposed to look, but at least he was wearing the right clothes. This whole thing was crazy and wildly risky and probably shouldn't have worked, but it did. And when Frederick got to New York City after passing through Philadelphia, our city, and found someone he could trust to help them, the first thing he did was send for Anna, who could travel because she was free. And the first thing they did was get married. And the next thing they did was go further north, where it was a little bit safer, into New England, where for a lot of the rest of their lives, Anna kept Frederick's homes, raised his children. They had 5 children together, while Frederick became one of the most famous speakers and abolitionists and writers of his time. Eventually, Frederick also got legally free, even before the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth, because supporters paid for his freedom. after he got physically free with Anna. Frederick spoke out. He fought for freedom for his people with words, and that was important. Anna didn't speak out that way, but she was also a freedom fighter. She fought with her actions. She worked with abolitionist groups. She ran a station on the Underground Railroad in their home. And she made sure that Frederick had what he needed to be able to speak out. She had freedom given to her. And she didn't just keep it for herself, she gave it away. She used it. She got Frederick free, she got her children educated, and she helped as many seeking freedom as she could, doing what she could with what she had where she was. We should know her face and her name. Anna Marie Douglas, abolitionist and freedom worker. And now I would invite our children and youth to gather with me in the atrium, and we'll sort out where everybody belongs.
Each month, we donate half of our collection to a worthy organization in need. The recipient of MLUC's offering outreach for June is People Advancing Reintegration Recycle Works, or PAR Recycling. This organization is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization located in North Philadelphia. They provide transitional employment, job skills training, and permanent job placement to people returning from prison. It earns revenue by responsibly recycling discarded end-of-life electronics for its supply partners. None of the products of their recycling process go to landfills. By employing justice-impacted people returning home from incarceration, PAR strengthens environmentally sustainable communities, as well as the families to which their employees are returning. In 2024, PAR realized a zero recidivism rate in their participants. The PAR recycling program aligns with UU Principle Number 1, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and Number 2, supporting justice, equity, and compassion in human relations and furthering the world community. To make a cashless donation, whether watching remotely or from here in the sanctuary, please follow the instructions on the screen or on the back page of the order of service. The offering will now be gratefully received. Will the ushers please come forward?
chez du cahier. C'est comme ça la vie devait marcher.
At this time in the service, it is our custom to share personal joys and sorrows, expecting to be heard, accepted, and supported. As a community, we acknowledge each joy or sorrow by lighting a candle and saying together, "We hold you in our hearts." It is with great joy that Kathy Landay is celebrating her granddaughter Bree's graduation from Oregon State University. She graduated summa cum laude from the College of Chemical Engineering and received an award for academic honors from her professors. Brees has said that her aim is to work in a field that solves problems for the health of our planet. This coming year, she will be teaching English in Spain. For Kathy, Brisa, and their family, we hold you in our hearts. Deirdre Gordon and Lloyd Cole, lost their home and most of their belongings in a fire this past Tuesday. They are grateful that no residents were injured in this fire, which involved 10 townhouses, and that all of the volunteer firefighters affected by the heat have recovered. For Deirdre and Lloyd, we hold you in our hearts. Nuala Carpenter is remembering her friend Karen Davies, who was a member of this congregation and killed by an impaired driver 9 years ago today. For Nuala, we hold you in our hearts. And let us light one more candle for those of us with joys or sorrows too deep to say out loud at this time. We hold you in our hearts.
Okay, good morning. Is that better? Good morning. Good. This morning I don't have a poem, but I would like to invite us into some movement. The world is worlding as it does, and sometimes those pains and sorrows can get stuck in our body. And so I would invite you to rise in mind, body, or spirit, and let us move some of that sorrow out of our bodies this morning. Invite you to close your eyes. For those of you at home, if you're sitting or standing, please get comfortable. Taking nice, deep breath in, and exhaling out. In and out. And if you're able to, take your chin and bring it down to your chest. Breathing in and out, coming to bringing your head to center. Lifting your chin up to the sky. Breathing in and breathing out. And turning your head to the right. Breathing in and breathing out. Coming to center. And turning your head to the left. Breathing in and breathing out. Coming to center. Rolling your shoulders back with each breath, exhaling. Breathing in and breathing out. And because it's good to keep our bodies balanced, let us reverse that, bringing our shoulders forward, breathing in and breathing out. And if you're able to roll your wrist inward, sometimes they don't get a lot of attention. We spend a lot of times on our phones typing. Sometimes we need to release that tension. Breathing in and breathing out. And reverse that motion. Bringing your arms down. And as you're able, if you're able to take a deep breath in and lifting your arms up as far as they can go. Breathing in and let's exhale nice and loud out as we bring our arms down. Good. Let's do that one more time. Breathing in, lifting our arms up. And let it out. May you be present as the service continues. Thank you for participating.
I'm on, okay. This next song is called Heritage Waltz, and it's about the language and the food and the culture of Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, the prairies and the bayous being kept. And the refrain says, I was a Cajun when I was born, and I'll be a Cajun when I die. The two other songs we did, the one right before this was Valse de Vieux, Vacher, the old cowboy. It says he was really tired, and so is his horse, and they go home and get something to eat, and that's the life of an old cowboy. And then the first song was My Old Wagon. I didn't actually sing that, but he says he goes to the dance in his old wagon, and he has to sleep in his old wagon. And then he goes to the next time he goes to the dance, he meets someone that he loves, would fall in love with, but he still has to sleep in his old wagon. Next time he goes to the dance, he and all of his kids and his wife all have to sleep in the wagon. So, just so you know a little bit about what the songs are about. l'espérer ce symbole. Aïe, le manger est si bon, et la Louisiane est si forte. J'étais que jeune quand j'étais né, et je suis que jeune quand va mourir. There will be a dance lesson at 12 o'clock today right here in the sanctuary, Cajun dance. And then we're going to play for dance music and just plain old listening for an hour. Big French, I just mimic it.
That was great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let's give another round of applause to the Bayou Porch. Music and dance are ways that we can live into our bodies to release any type of feelings of tension and stress and anxiety. And music promotes, at least for me, a sense of rejuvenation and healing and joy, which is something that we always need no matter what we are going through. And I hope that you who are joining us online today, hello, thank you for joining us. I hope you were able to feel the good vibrations that are coming through your screens today. And it's always a pleasure to be here in community with you all. And thank you, MLUC. Thank you for being a place where people can connect. Thank you for supporting one another. And thank you for always allowing this to be a place where your ideas and thoughts, joys and sorrows can be held with love and grace. Go ahead, answer your phone, it's okay. It's okay, it happens, it happens. Hopefully it's not my phone. So, I don't need to tell you that the last week and a half, 2 weeks, our country has been going through it. And this past Friday, lots of things happened this past Friday, but one that sticks out the most for me is this past Friday, the Supreme Court ruled that will now require public schools to allow parents to opt out of any type of lessons that doesn't align with their family's religious beliefs. And this is troubling because this includes lessons that are LGBTQ+ themed. And I have to say, I believe that there's going to be some significant consequences because of what happened on Friday. This ruling does not support, nor does it foster, an inclusive, culturally responsive learning environment for our children. And these are just my thoughts. And I deeply believe that sharing stories, that when we have an opportunity to share stories about people with diverse backgrounds, it's essential, particularly in this country where divisiveness is at the helm of what is going on right now in our country and in our world. And I've been up here a few times, and many of you have heard me talk about how I homeschooled my own child. And there were many reasons why I chose to homeschool. But one of them was because I really wanted my child to have a progressive education that was rooted in a culturally responsive model that was integrated across the curriculum, and it was rooted in narratives and stories and voices of people who have been historically marginalized in our education system, in our K-12 system. And it was essential for me to cultivate this learning environment for my child because I wanted her to feel nurtured. I wanted her to develop strong critical thinking skills. I wanted her to have the opportunity to play and to be curious and to be creative. And this wasn't just about my own child, it was about all children, who I believe deserved an education that reflects the diverse identities and histories. And especially for my family, it was really important for me that we centered the language and the histories of Black Americans in this country, particularly those figures whose contributions were often and are often overlooked in the K-12 education. And I wanted my child to know about these important figures in our history, and I also wanted it to move beyond who was typically spoken about: Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. I wanted my child to have the opportunity to explore the richness of her heritage, and I needed it to be from a decolonized perspective. And I needed it to be, I didn't want her education to be whitewashed. I'm going to speak plainly, right? So that was really important for me. So hearing what happened on Friday was really heart-wrenching to know that moving forward in some places, parents are going to have this opportunity, so to speak, to opt out of lessons that they don't feel aligned with their beliefs. And so as you can clearly hear, education is really important to me. And it's one of the many seeds that I plant in the world. And at the height of the pandemic, as the world was grappling with the fallout of systemic racism and the urgent call to justice, and many were in the streets, not only in this country, but worldwide, protesting the murder of George Floyd, I retreated. I retreated to my office in the basement of my home in Maine, and that was a very transformative moment for me. So while people were out there protesting in the streets, I was doing my activism, my work of resistance as an online educator. I was planting seeds for the long game. I created a brave space. I created a brave and inclusive space for homeschoolers and those who were being schooled at home because of the pandemic, an opportunity to fill that void that was left by many traditional school systems. I had this amazing opportunity to teach students from the ages of 8 to 16, from diverse backgrounds across the United States, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and even Iceland. And initially, I was not too sure if the younger students were going to be ready to engage with deep, thought-provoking conversations about complex topics about race, racism, the dynamics of queerness, terrorist groups, economic disparities, chattel slavery, jazz, the Great Migration North, Juneteenth, and so much more. But I gotta tell you, these kids were on point. I was blown away each and every class that I had with them, and these children were engaged. These children were insightful. They were articulate, and they knew what was happening at the time here in America, and they knew about Black Lives Matter. They knew about the killing of Black and brown people at the hands of the police. And despite the geographical and cultural differences, these students all had something in common. They had this unquenchable thirst for knowledge. They craved a space where they could process all that was going on in the world at the time. They needed a place to reflect their thoughts in a courageous and brave space, and they needed a place to engage these challenging topics. And not only were these children amazing and on point, their caregivers were just as amazing, and they played a vital role. They recognized the gap in their children's education, and they understood the importance of uplifting historically marginalized voices in American history. And this was really, really huge, because what it did and what it does, it supports and creates an environment where meaningful and powerful dialogue can flourish. And even though it might be hard for caregivers and some students to confront these uncomfortable truths about our history here in the United States, it allows us to envision a better future when we have these conversations together. So in my classroom, I challenge students to dismantle oppressive narratives woven throughout our history. We explored the significance of language, learning to use terms like enslaved versus slave. We talked about those who were held in bondage versus using the word slave owner or master. We confronted the harsh realities of our past by recognizing that groups such as the Ku Klux Klan was truly a terrorist organization. And between all of this learning that was happening in class, remember it was online and some of these kids were 8, they would take the time to walk me through their houses, show me their pets, introduce me to their baby brother or sister, and sometimes I got to see the inside of the refrigerator as they were getting snacks. And this was just part of the learning process. It was an opportunity for us to bond and to develop trust with one another. These students were able to draw parallels between police violence and the struggles highlighted with the Black Panther and the Black Lives Movement and Colin Kaepernick, showcasing the continuing fight for justice. We delved into the powerful writings of James Baldwin at 8, exploring the complex intersectionality of what it meant to be Black, gay, and poor in America. We reflected on how fighting for justice for one's rights could lead to someone being called a communist. Does that sound familiar? We uncovered the true story behind Rosa Parks and what happened on that bus, the NAACP and why Claudette Colvin is not honored today. The students learned that the media actually played a major role in perpetuating the division between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., and we celebrated the richness of Zora Neale Hurston and the importance of oral history alongside of written accounts, that they are just as valuable. The students learned about the Harlem Renaissance and the Great Migration North, and without that, we may not have jazz music today. So like I said, I was not out in the streets protesting. I was in my basement. And some other people were running for office during that time. Some people were posting on social media as a way to engage with social justice. But my path was not in the streets, it was in my basement. It was rooted in education. It was rooted in making that one-on-one connection. And I planted seeds, one student and one class at a time. And this was a very small act of transformative resistance. Remember I said I was in it for the long game? That's what that looks like. And that long game impacted over 700 students across the globe. And at the end of each class, I asked students some very simple questions. Tell me one thing, just one thing that you learned today. And who are you going to share it with? See, these simple questions, these were a way to catalyst change. It was a way to inspire heartfelt discussions at the dinner table and with families and friends. And this is how I impacted these students' lives. And this is how they impacted my life during the pandemic. And one of my most favorite classes to teach was called Bold Men in Black History, the story of Frederick Douglass. And as we approached the 4th of July, I thought I would share a little bit about Frederick Douglass and his story, because it's a story of hope. It's a story about faith, and it's a story about freedom. But before I get into that story, I need to talk a little bit about the 4th of July. The 4th of July is a time when many celebrate the independence of the United States. You know, the day the Declaration of Independence was adopted back in July 4th, 1776, when 13 colonies won and severed their ties with Great Britain. The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created, and they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these rights are life. All right. So let's be clear. Back in 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was written, not everybody was living their best life, right? Everybody in the United States was not equal. And we must name that. We must name that during that time, it was still legal to hold black bodies in bondage. And it denied women the right to, all right. What'd you say?
Sorry, I said do anything.
Exactly. So celebrating the 4th of July, for me, is a mixed bag. Especially now, as the United States is under authoritarian regime. this is a bittersweet time for me because, truth be told, I do love a good cookout. And I particularly love when my hot dogs are just a little bit burnt. And fireworks are okay, but I struggle with the noise and the trauma that I know that it can cause people and animals. So I know that for many, the 4th of July is a holiday that commemorates independence from Great Britain. But for me, it's a time to contemplate American history. And it recognizes the struggle faced by those who fought for freedom and those who are continuing to fight for freedom. And it is a constant reminder of the responsibility we have to ensure that people who have been harmed by this country and who are currently being harmed by this administration have the same unalienable rights of life, liberty, amen. And I don't even want to get started on how this country was founded on stolen land, so I will save that for another sermon. So those of you who have heard me preach before may remember me talking about hope. And I say that hope is this thing that has yet to be created. And sometimes people still don't quite understand what I mean by the thing that has yet to be created. This time that we are in now is going to require us to dig deep inside our souls and our spirits, the dream world and beyond, to think of the unimaginable things. Because we are being met with a highly orchestrated framework. I'm going to say that again. We are being met with a highly orchestrated framework to dismantle our unalienable rights that the Constitution was founded on. And in order for us to meet that kind of scaffolding that's laid out, for example, in Project 2025, we need to move differently, people. That's right. All right? We need to move beyond protest. We need to move beyond calling our representatives. This time is going to require the fight of our lives. And there are some lessons I think we can take from Frederick Douglass, because I think he can teach us about that hope that has yet to be created. So Frederick Douglass was born in bondage around 1888. He was born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey to Harriet Bailey, who was an enslaved woman. And I'm not sure if you know this, but if your mother was enslaved, that meant you were enslaved by law. If your mother was free, that meant you were born free. And it's rumored that Frederick's biological father was Captain Aaron Anthony, the man who held Frederick and his mother in bondage. Frederick's mother called him her little Valentine. And since Frederick didn't really know when his birthday was, because back then they didn't keep such records for people who were enslaved and held in bondage, Frederick adopted February 14th as his birthday. Did I say, I think I messed up. I think I said he was born in 1888. It was 1818. Sorry. I was like, that math is not mathing up. So he was born in Tuckahoe Creek in Maryland, and he lived with his maternal grandparents, Betsy Bailey, who was enslaved, and Isaac Bailey, who was a free man of color. Now, this terminology, free man of color, does not mean the same thing as it does now when we say people of color. So free men of color were black people who were free, and today when we say people of color, we're talking about people of color. So it could be an array of people. It's talking about non-white people, the global majority. So Frederick's grandfather was free, and when Frederick was about 8 or 10 or so, he was held in bondage by the Old family, Thomas and Sophia. Sophia had taught Douglas the basics of reading and writing until her husband found out and made her stop. Because I'm not sure if you know, but during that time, it was against the law for enslaved people and even some free people of color to learn how to read and to write. And this is where Frederick's story starts to get pretty good. So when Sophia stopped teaching Frederick how to read, that didn't stop Frederick. He continued with his lessons. He got the help from poor white children in the neighborhood. And in his book, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, he says, "This bread I bestowed upon the hungry little urchins who in return would give me that more valuable bread of knowledge." See, this is what it looks like to hope into a space that is not yet created. And what you may not know also about Frederick Douglass is that he faced terrible, incredible hardships during his younger years. Douglass was often hired out by the people who enslaved him, kind of treating him like an enslaved subcontractor, if you will, where he received no financial rewards for his labor. That money went to the people that held him in bondage. And before the age of 20, he had already tried to escape to freedom 2 times with forged papers. And he was caught and beaten and tortured. But that didn't stop him. See, there's that hope. That didn't stop him because the 3rd time was a charm. And on September 3rd, 1838, with the help of his soon-to-be wife, Anna, that you learned about today, Douglass was able to disguise himself as a sailor. And he boarded a train at Havre de Grace Station in Maryland, and he was carrying false paperwork. And in less than 24 hours, he arrived in New York. He had escaped bondage, and he was free. And as time passed, Douglass became very popular. He was a well-sought-after orator because in his younger years, one of the ways that he would study is he had a book of speeches that he would read. And so it's no wonder he became a well-known orator. He was and the abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison hired him as a speaker for the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. And Garrison described Douglass by saying, "Flinty hearts were pierced and cold ones melted by his eloquence when he spoke." Douglass would travel the country giving anti-slavery speeches. And in 1843, he was chased and beaten by an angry mob in the Midwest because, well, you know, people were not a fan of his message. And in 1845, he released his first autobiography. And because he feared being recaptured, he moved to Ireland, and for 2 years he gave talks around Ireland and Great Britain. It was also that year that his English friends raised money to purchase his freedom from Hugh Auld. And in 1847, Douglas returned to the United States as a free man. This was only 3 short years before the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 is where the government sanctioned an act requiring those who were enslaved and escaped to freedom could be hunted and returned into bondage. That included the free states. I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment. So, if you will, imagine you have become a refugee. You have escaped. You have gotten to freedom. And then this Fugitive Slave Act comes up. And the government said it's okay. They hire people, right? They hire people to go retrieve these enslaved people from free states and bring them back down south. It required the free states to assist with these captures. Does that sound familiar, like anything that we are dealing with here today? Right. So on July 2nd, 1852, Frederick Douglass took himself on up to Rochester, New York, to the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society. And this is where he gave one of his most famous speeches. What to the slave is the 4th of July? Douglass said, "What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than any other day in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim." He continued and said, "You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of this earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are colored, who are not colored like your own." Now, this was the part of the lesson where students as young as 8 and 9 years old really got into comparing the Declaration of Independence and parts of Frederick Douglass's speech. These young students had no qualms about saying everyone was not treated equally and fairly. These kids got it. And here we are, 173 years later, just days before we're about to celebrate the 4th of July, with the grilling of the hamburgers and hot dogs and the fireworks. I want to invite you and encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the gross injustice and cruelty that so many are enduring right now.
And as fireworks light up the sky in celebration, let's not forget the cries of the innocent and the ongoing brutality faced by those who have co-opted and weaponized Christianity to serve as a political agenda that starkly contradicts the very essence of Jesus' teachings. Can I get an amen? Amen. And do I dare say that standing against the killing of children in Gaza could label you anti-Semitic from a government that lacks empathy and compassion? Right. We have work to do that is going to require us to move in new ways that some of you may not be familiar with and uncomfortable with. We must look back in history to understand how others have fought tyrannical governments. This moment in time is going to require us to engage in new spaces that we have yet created. New spaces like Stonewall, the Stonewall Uprising, June 28th, 1969. We need to do this while we center our UU values and uphold the Constitution. Because I'm here to tell you right now, my freedom is at stake. And all those named and unnamed people who have been abducted, so don't get it twisted, they have been abducted by ICE without due process, sent to Lord who knows where. Their freedom is at stake. Our educational system, the LGBTQ plus community and the trans community, their freedom is at stake. Women, voting rights, Medicare, Social Security, people with disabilities are at stake. Your neighbor, your coworker, your family, and each and every one of you are at stake. So what do? Fight. We need to utilize the power of social media to amplify our voices and engage in tough conversations that often get swept under the rug, especially at the dinner table during the holiday season. It is critical that we confront these issues directly instead of avoiding them for the sake of getting along. We need to lend our support to organizations that have been tirelessly fighting for justice and truth. We need to show up at the school board meetings, safeguarding and advocating for an inclusive and equitable learning environment for all. We need you to run for office. We need you to offer your time and your money and your energy where they will benefit the most vulnerable. And most importantly, and this is for my friends who are not from marginalized backgrounds, I'm gonna need you to listen, to actively listen to the experiences, the lived experiences of people who have been doing this work for a long time. Frederick Douglass, formerly enslaved, considered 3/4 of a person, is an example of resilience and strength in the face of unimaginable adversity. Douglass's journey to freedom began deep within his mind, body, and soul. Douglass co-founded the American Equal Rights Association, championed women's suffrage movement, and did you know that he received a vote for president at a major political party convention? He also published 3 autobiographies and so much more. This is an example of what hope looks like in spaces that has yet to be created. And this 4th of July, I invite you to ponder, what lessons can you take from Frederick Douglass and his speech? What to the slave is the 4th of July? So we're going to take a little bit of time to hear these words, what to the slave is the 4th of July, and we're going to watch a reading by his descendants. And once that concludes, I'm going to invite you to directly rise in body and spirit to sing our closing hymn, Let Freedom Span from East to West. If you will.
Do I look there or look there? Okay. Okay. My name is Alexa Ann Watson, and I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of
Frederick Douglass is my great-great-great-great.
I'm the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Douglass.
I am the great-great-great-great-grandchild. I've been counting on my fingers since I was like 5.
Whenever you're ready, here we go.
This is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom.
Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment.
With brave men, there's always a remedy for oppression.
They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence?
Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us?
I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary.
Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common.
The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me.
The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me.
This 4th of July is yours, not mine.
You may rejoice, I must mourn.
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed.
Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke.
For it is not light that is needed, but fire.
It is not the gentle shower, but thunder.
We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake.
The feeling of the nation must be quickened.
The conscience of the nation must be roused.
The propriety of the nation must be startled.
The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed.
And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
To him, your celebration is a sham.
Your boasted liberty an unholy license.
Your national greatness, swelling vanity.
Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless.
Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence.
Your shouts of liberty and equality. hollow mockery.
Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings,
with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him
mere bombast,
fraud,
deception,
impiety,
and hypocrisy. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country.
This speech was written almost 170 years ago, but this part of it is still extremely relevant, especially with today's protests.
I think that when people are oppressed, they feel silenced, and if someone feels silenced, they get angry. There are certain tactics that you need to use to get people to really hear your voice, and it's not always going to be just like a very calm discussion.
I think he's mostly talking to the people who are already on his side, but believe that they can still try to talk this out, or that things are still justifiable. I know a lot of people at the time were saying, and people now are still saying, that it's not as bad as it could be.
While the 4th of July probably does not feel the same to me as it does to others, I wouldn't say that it has no meaning, because it is the time when America as a country became free from another country. But I would say that it's not the time in which I gained my freedom.
He had a lot of hope, especially for his age. And I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm only 20 years old, but I'm exhausted. I have these thoughts like, will we ever really get to this point? Or is this really something that we should actually spend our time fighting for?
Somebody once said that pessimism is a tool of white oppression, and I think that's true. I think in many ways we are still slaves to the notion that it will never get better. But I think that there is hope, and I think it's important that we celebrate Black joy and Black life, and we remember that change is possible, change is probable, and that there's hope.
And at this time, I'd like to invite you to rise in mind, body, and spirit for our closing hymn. Let Freedom Span Both East and West, hymn number 148. And as we extinguish our chalice today, in a world besieged by heartache and agony, we all have a choice to be storms or lighthouses to each other. May we choose to be the beacons rather than despair. I want to leave us with a reminder that life is not always about balance, but it's more of a rhythmic dance, leaning into and flowing from allows us the flexibility. And this is what's going to liberate us, liberate ourselves from perfection, liberate us from anxiety and overload. And even though we live in a world that can be besieged by heartache and agony, we must commit to being the lighthouses for one another and ourselves. And what better way to do that than with joy, laughter, and love at the center. And it is my pleasure to invite all of you to the Cajun dance today with the Bayou Porch Rockers here at the church from 12 to 1. And no partner or dance experience is required. And it's an invitation to come tap your toes and simply soak up the music of good vibes. And to get us in the mood for that today, we are going to head out in a Soul Train style type of line on our way over to coffee hour while the Bayou Porch Rockers play our postlude. So the ushers will lead us out, and I say to all of you, amen, ashe, and it is so. Let's get this dance party started, everyone.
If you will indulge me for just a moment, I was very moved by Yvette's speech. I have been a Unitarian for over 4 decades, and I've been involved in Cajun music for over 3 decades. And she spoke of hypocrisy in her sermon. It's been very difficult for me to find a music that I love so deeply in my soul from an area of the country where there is still so much racism, discrimination, and all kinds of, you call it ex-phobia, whatever it is. However, it's a very happy, joyous music. My hope is that we move toward a country where all the areas of this country can have happy and joyous music, but also freedom and rights for everyone. Happy one step. Thank you.